Greetings and salutations, everyone. So, in Legion, we were given quite honestly one of the most interesting concepts, the class order halls, where you could uncover powerful artifacts to your class, travel to your robust and homey station on different corners of the world, sometimes even the cosmos. Recruit some of the best champions on Azeroth to fight against your foes, and come together to defeat the one antagonizing your whole order. This and many other things made Legion stand out a lot, and while it wasn't perfect at times, it certainly had ambition, and was one of the few things that stood out in Legion the most. Now, I have had this idea since the conclusion of Legion. What better way to carry on from an expansion focusing on class fantasy to instead focus on the race fantasy in Warcraft with race halls? As I believe the races in WoW deserve way more attention and way more love than they are currently getting. And I think race halls are a perfect solution for this, as usually during an expansion, some races do feel left out more than others. This way, everyone gets to have some attention. Today, I'm going to revive this idea in hopes that one day we could see something like this in the future. Now, I've tried my best to explain in the intro, but let me make sure we all get this sorted out. What is a race hall? Essentially, a race hall would be putting some major focus on the races of World of Warcraft, be it the orcs, humans, goblins, Pandaren, and so on. You would gather up inside your hall, which for this would be your racial capital. I'm going to heavily use the orcs for the example of this video mainly, but for this, specifically, I'll list them all here because I want everyone to get a clear idea of where they would be. Orcs would get Orgrimmar, goblins would retake the city of Kazan, Worgen would have Gilneas back, Draenei would have the reconstruction of the Exodar, Sin'dorei, or Blood Elves, would have a newly rebuilt Silvermoon, humans a revamped Stormwind, Pandaren would have the 2 shrines in Pandaria, gnomes finally will take Gnomeregan, trolls would get the beautiful city of Dazar'alor, Tauren a revamped Thunderbluff, Night Elves would have Nodrassil, aka Mount Hyjal, Forsaken would get Stratholme, after clearing the fires of course, and the Dwarves would of course get Ironforged, Reforged. See what I did there? As I'm sure you've noticed, I threw in rebuilt, revamped, retaken, and, well, reforged. I'm sorry about using that word, guys. This, I would think, would be a perfect solution to revamp old zones and cities for multiple races who either don't have a racial capital anymore, or they never did, or their capital is very dated looking. The Night Elves, for instance, lost Teldrassil fairly recently, so let's see what they're up to in Nodrassil, for example, and focus on that, as Nodrassil hasn't really received much of an update since Cataclysm, so yeah, I think that definitely needs to be updated and look a little bit better, more polished, and of course have the Night Elves in their capital. Here we would have a story for why they're all coming together, give them development, and understand what they've been up to throughout the years. As I've said, many races really haven't had much focus in the last 3 expansions, and I think it's only fair that all races in Azeroth should matter. One thing I mentioned before I continue, as I didn't list them earlier, I want to address it now. Just as the original races deserve some focus, I think the allied races too deserve that. As already giving 24 races a campaign, storylines, rewards, etc. would be a very daunting task, so some races would share a story and a hull together. For example, the Orcs and the Mag'har would share their race hull. It would give just as much focus on the OG Orcs as it would for the Mag'har. They're both similar enough, so I wouldn't really see this being that much of a problem. It would also give Overlord Gaia some much needed focus, love, and attention. The main two allied races that I don't really see having much of a connection to the other races are the Volpera and the Void Elves. Many of the other races have a really good counterpart, usually with whom they were recruited by in the first place. So some would get their own unique story, and others wouldn't. I could definitely see there being a case, though, for bridges drawn between the elven races of the Kaldurai, Nightborn, Sindorai, and the Rendorai. I actually think it would be really cool to see these 4 elven races join together against someone or something, maybe, but they would still exclusively have their own tale for the most part. Think of the way that they treated the Priest and Paladin Order Halls, kind of have their own beginning and own middle, but they had the same end. That's kind of how I'm seeing it here. The story would give focus to, of course, the races of Azeroth, Draenor, and Argus, where they would come together against some form of threat or menace, maybe learn to grow with one another, and, really sappy stuff like that, while also giving some major focus to the cultures and characters of that race, much like how in Legion we had the Class Order Halls fight against the Burning Crusade. Perhaps the main threat this time in this expansion would be the Void and their servants, or maybe even the Lights. This is where things can go anywhere, really. Using the Orcs again as an example, maybe they're faced with some old ghosts like the Burning Blade, who are still worshipping demons. There could also be the Lightbound, who've returned from the alternate Draenor, or maybe even an illegitimate son of Garrosh and Zayla or something. Who knows? The sky's the limit here for developing new or old enemies, while also giving major love to the races of the world. Magatha is still lying in wait for the Tauren to be faced with and pay for her crimes against Karen and the rest of the Tauren tribes. What about the Dark Iron cult leader that threatened to revive Ragnaros? Where's he? There's plenty of threats and stories for our races to be faced with and focus on out there. Plenty of plots left unfinished that can now be finished through the use of the race halls. Also give some focus on the location of the halls. If this is a city, let's see some of the stories inside the city, and also the reconstruction or taking back of parts of it, and so on. If I'm a goblin, I want to see Kazan again, and go there whenever I want to, and see how it's been since the Cataclysm tore it apart. We could also go back to the places beyond just in Azeroth, but in Argus and Outland, maybe even alternate Draenor. I definitely think the Orcs and the Draenei players deserve to know where they came from, stuff like that. The Orcish clans for the longest time, for example, have been without a chieftain or leader, and were dissolved by Thrall. But the Mag'har didn't do this, and while all are united on the name and banner of the Mag'har, they still show their customs vividly. Perhaps Thrall was wrong to dissolve such a thing, and that can be revived now. That'd be a good arc between Thrall and Gaia. They are brother and sister, after all. Again, this should not only be about developing your race, but also understanding them. Warcraft is rich with years of lore and development, and I think we're due for a refresher course to some capacity. Let's learn about our race's cultures, history, and characters, and so on. This should be the definite goal here. Speaking of the characters, as stated, this would be like the successor of Legion, which, if you recall, we would not only recruit several champions around the world, but we would learn about their character and how they act. Maybe even give a little bit of their backstory too. Some of which have been in the game for years, others are new, and some were even from the comics and books. I would apply that same logic with many of the racial heroes and leaders in your race halls. There are so many characters in Warcraft that collected some serious dust over the years, and this would be a fine way to bring them back and give them some focus. It could bring along some fan favorites too, or of course, the fans. As I addressed with so many characters in Warcraft, there's only so much time we get to spend with them. This way we could get to see what they've been up to and give them some serious attention, and let them interact with each other. How's Drekthar been? He's very old and maybe it's time to see him go. I'd love to see a scene between him and Thrall. That very emotional stuff, very sad. What about Rexxar? Who is he, and why do I talk about him so much? Let's see him interact with Garona, who's also a half-orc. Last time we saw Ariok, he became some orcish berserker. How does his dad, Eitrig, feel about that? What is the state of some of the clans like the Dragonmaw? Who leads them now? Who will lead the other orcish clans if they're revitalized? There's a lot of plots and stories that you could do alone just by having the characters there to breathe and be given some attention. Speaking of leaders, this is more of an issue for the Horde, but we've had a very large amount of characters becoming leaders recently. And again, this would be a great way to focus on that. Rokhan, Gazlo, and Liliavos are the current leaders of their races. I think we're definitely due to address that and give them some serious development with their new roles. This applies as well with the allied race leaders, who on both sides of the faction don't get too much attention either. Let's just see our leaders do more, and more especially, let's see them lead their people. And lead us. Now, I don't have too much to say in regards to the gameplay, that's not really my expertise, but I would love to see some challenges again with some of the quests and quest lines. The Warlock Greenfire quest chain is a perfect example of giving us some updates on old areas, characters, while also providing a challenge and a really cool reward. In Legion, we received the Mage Tower, which recently has been revived in Shadowlands, which wasn't required and just gave us some really cool tints for our weapons. Maybe in the same vein, they could give us something like this for whatever system in place, either for our own artifact weapons we made ourselves, or armor, or something. I also think it'd be cool for a talent tree or of some kind that allows us to give a boost to our racial abilities, and maybe even our class abilities. Maybe give some kind of cosmetic look to set ability that many have been asking for. This way it would stick with us beyond the expansion, as our racials have been upgraded and some of our abilities have been modified. In terms of reward, we could see some revamped mounts and armors and weapons that are heavily connected to our races. Have you guys seen some of the models of our first mounts? Yeah, let's give those some new graphics, please. One of the things I really appreciated about Battle for Azeroth was the Heritage Armor and the Warfront Armor that were added. It would be perfect to see those types of rewards for the race halls. Let's see more armor and weapons themed around our races. Some races need it more than others, and the others could use some more variety. Some might or will be disappointed for their Heritage Armors or their Warfront Armors that we have gotten, so this could be a way to correct that possibly. Like the Warden Armor for the Night Elves, or a Wolf Cowl for the Orcs. Look, some of us are really tired of the grunt or footman looks for the Orcs and humans, so this could be another means to fix that. Really, when I look at it more, I just want continuous Heritage Armor quest chain for all the races to receive some attention in terms of lore, gameplay, and aesthetics. But those were my thoughts and ideas and concepts for the race halls. It's been an idea for a while now that I've been sitting on, and I was happy to finally address it here. What are some of your ideas you'd want for the race halls? Would you want this sort of thing in Warcraft or not? I'd love to hear some of your ideas and concepts and your thoughts all down below. Let's get some ideas going, and maybe, just maybe, they'll happen. Okay, I don't work for Blizzard, but I can hope at least. Subscribe if you like these videos, support me on my various other social medias. You can join us on the Skull Shorties Discord, where we talk about all sorts of stuff. And if you like me enough, you can support me on Patreon like these amazing folks here. But until next time, guys, see ya!